Hello, this is Bill Dixon, President of North Carolina Vietnam Veterans. Thank you for tuning in. My co-host, Mr. Bob Matthews, and I are excited tonight about our show. We've got a return guest, Mr. Cary Turner. Cary is the cousin of Joseph Hargrove, one of the 41 names we've been reading for 27 years now, the first Saturday of the month, plus special times. And we had such a good response from his earlier when he was on the show and talking about his book, and some things have gone on and changed a little bit and improved and got worse. But things with the POW issue never seems to get static. It's always a lot of mistruths and confusion and so forth out there. Bob will be with you in a few minutes. Bob is our educational czar. He was 40 years as a teacher and still teaches. We taught at school in Vietnam about a week or so ago now. If you saw the last show, we were in Dong Ha, Vietnam, where we put together a playground. If you didn't see the show, be sure to go to nisoncommunications.com and look on the archives, or go to ncvi.org and look on the archives for the show. It was a great show, lots of information on the show. We talked to some of the Vietnamese people. The kids were all there. The kids were on the playground swinging and going down slides at 4 o'clock in the morning. Not to say they were excited about the playground or anything, but in order for us to be on the show at 7 o'clock, we had to be there by 5:30 in the morning, and the kids were already up waiting for us going down the slides. But we had to be there at 5:30, and we actually almost looked like we were awake most of the time on the show, because we've been getting started early anyway. We decided to start work every morning at 7 o'clock to beat the heat, and we did for about 30 minutes. We beat the heat, and then 98 to 100 and something. A lot of old folks out there trying to put the playground together. Had a great time. We went to visited high school there. Some of the local high schools who teach the lessons of Vietnam that Bob started in high school many years ago. Those students locally put together manila envelopes with packages themselves, the pictures of their home, and so forth. We carried those and gave them to the high school students there in Dong Ha High School. That's an unusual high school. Everybody there speaks English better than I do, which is not that hard because I speak Southern. We visited with the teachers there and the students there, gave them the packets. And we've already gotten word from good response from the kids here and the kids over in Vietnam, already emailing each other back and forth. So that's an exciting part of our trip. Also, we introduced you to a young lady on that program that at 18, they have to leave that orphanage for street children because there's a waiting list. The orphanage is actually supported by the Red Cross. And this young lady was absolutely fantastic help while we were out there working. It seemed like wherever somebody needed something, she was there handing it to her. She didn't understand English that well, but she learned hammer and socket wrench and what size sockets. All you had to do was holler for a hammer, and next thing you know, there was a hammer in your hand, and somebody else would holler, and then they would get the same thing. She has to leave, and she is one of 5 children. Her father is a pedicab driver. In other words, he pedals a bicycle with a little cab on the back for people to ride. And we appreciated her help so much that North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated has decided to give her a scholarship. We're going to pay for her college so that she can, when she graduates, I know she'll go back and help the kids there at the school. And so if you're interested in helping out with a scholarship, you can go online, and there's ability there to donate through Nissan Communications. Just put scholarship down. She's a very sweet young lady, deserves anything anybody can do for her. She right now looks after about 30 children there. She makes clothes for them. But unfortunately, at 18, she has to leave, and so we have promised her we're going to do a scholarship for her. But getting back to the program, what we're talking about now is important to Cary. Since we met last time and had the show, been a lot of things going on. You want to kind of hit the high spots a little bit, or you take it over and it's your show now. You say what you want to, do what you want to. I ask you the question, what's changed, and it's all yours now.
Okay. First, before we get into our second part, I'd like to make a correction from
that's right. You want to make an editorial correction.
An editorial correction. When we were talking or speaking of evidence that was mishandled at Site 1998A, which I believe is the site of Joseph's, or to be more accurate, the executed American. I had stated that it was 1991, and I try to reason that out. How did that happen? Because the minute I heard that, I knew it was wrong. There were 2 years that I really focused on, and that was 1999 and 2001. So I guess that's how the 1991 came out. But the actual year, when the evidence, it was suggested it was mishandled, was 1999. Also,
well, we'll just consider that it was just a trial to see if anybody was paying attention.
Yeah. I try to be accurate, and if I do find a mistake, I try to correct it. I'm all about truth. And also with Mr. Matthews asked me had I made contact with any of the families, Gary or Danny's family, and I said Danny Marshall's.
Gary and Danny, those are the other two Marines that were lost or abandoned with Joseph.
Yeah, the gunnery crew. And I had said that I spoke with Danny Marshall's sister. It was actually his niece.
Oh, his niece. Okay.
So those are the two corrections. Everything else is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
All right.
I'd like to go more tonight into the meeting with J-Pack and with Johnny Webb, and because I had only mentioned the part about David Rosenau and things that went on across the table. Mm-hmm. But with Johnny Webb, if you remember, I had said that Johnny said, Mr. Turner, if there's anything you think we need to be made aware of, I give you my word I'll look into it.
Okay, now before we go any further, just for the people who didn't see the last show, tell them who Johnny Webb is.
Well,
I know who Johnny Webb is. I've met him, but...
Johnny Webb is, he takes part in the public relations with J-Pack when they have the briefing of the families. And I had tried to arrange an earlier meeting with my family because they had it scheduled at 3:30. And I had the congressman's assistant with me as a witness, and he had to leave by lunchtime. He had family in for the weekend. So Johnny Webb agreed to an earlier meeting. And when we went in there, I won't review that again about the opening part of it, but Johnny had said, if there's anything you think we need to be made aware of, I give you my word I'll look into it. So I began to tell Johnny some of the things that my witnesses had told me. And as I began to tell Mr. Webb these things, one thing was that my witnesses said that there were remains flown out at Phnom Penh Airport. And he said he had no knowledge of any remains being flown out. So I made a little mental note. And as we continued, I also stated that my witnesses said that there were 4 sets of remains, full sets of remains recovered. And he says, well, I have no knowledge of any full set being recovered. So once we were out of this meeting, I got home and I emailed my friend Noma and asked him to check newspapers, the local newspapers, and I gave him a time frame to look because I knew that this would happen somewhere around March 1st.
When you say local newspapers?
In Phnom Penh.
Not in Phnom Penh, okay.
And in a few weeks, Noma sent me a picture. And I pursued this, and I contacted the editor of the Phnom Penh Post, and he was generous enough to send me an issue. It was the March 1st issue of 2008. And just to show for those who are listening tonight, this is the Phnom Penh Post issue. It's the March 7th through the 20th, 2008. And on the third page, up in the top right corner, it shows where there are soldiers carrying a flag-draped coffin. And it's very specific, and it says that there were American remains that were found on Koh Tang Island. and I have every reason to believe that this was my cousin's remains. And one of the things here, and I had spoken earlier saying that when Tom Holland said we had nothing to talk about, I had a letter on my person that Johnny Webb had sent to my Congressman Walter Jones, and it stated that they had found 4 samples. Now, Ralph Wetterhunt and myself, we were aware of 3 samples at the time.
Let me interrupt just a second. So Johnny Webb sent a letter out saying there were 4 sets of remains.
4 samples.
4 samples, but then he turned around and told you there was nothing.
Well, that was Tom Holland.
Okay.
So, see, Tom didn't know I had that.
All right, now
that
who is
letter.
Tom?
Tom also, he's the head man over the Central Identification Lab.
Okay, just
Hawaii.
because some people might not have seen the first show, and I want to make sure they know who the characters are, and emphasis on the word characters. So.
Right. Thank you. So Johnny, in that letter stating 4 samples, we were aware of 3 samples, and then we left the island. Our time had expired. And so in the 4th sample, by his letter, we knew that they found a sample after we left.
Yeah.
So according to my witnesses, this fits.
Now, when you say we left, you have gone to Coney Island twice?
Twice.
Okay.
This was the first trip.
Okay.
Ralph Wetterhunt assisted me on this trip.
Yeah. That was the man who wrote the original book,
The Last Battle.
The Last Battle. Okay.
So this would, right here, it proves they had 4 samples. They found a sample after we left. According to my witnesses, they said they uncovered a sample, American remains. And later they invited Ralph 18 months after the fact to view these remains by photographs. And when he came back, he had stated they were all Asian. And so that's all I could get from JPAC through Ralph, is they were all Asian.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, well, in the last few weeks, Matt Burke with Stars and Stripes had contacted Charles Ray. Charles Ray was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for POWMA, personnel affairs. And Charles Ray says he no longer works with JPAC. And he said he remembers reading the on-site report just before he left. This would be at the end of 2009. And he said that according to the on-site report, it stated that there were 3 Asian and 1 Caucasian, just as my witnesses were saying. So once you put all this together, you've got the head man at the time saying that according to that, the on-site evaluation, and you say, well, they might have made a mistake. But we know that JPAC in the past has used photographs alone of World War II remains, and just viewing the photographs, they can determine whether it's Caucasian or Asian. I mean, that's how there's that much of a notable difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so do I think they made a mistake? On-site evaluation, skulls in hand? I don't think so. And for the listeners, I'm telling you, this is my opinion. So take it for what it's worth. But what I actually believe is that once they got these remains and they carried them to the Central Identification Lab, that once the DNA testing was done, that they actually realized who they had. And I had mentioned earlier program about the powers that be,
mm-hmm. that
it probably trickled down that he don't go home, because Joseph Hargrove is the most Googled name in the Mayaguez incident. Year before last, he had over 834,000 hits.
834,000.
And they do not want something as well known as this,
mm-hmm.
because if it gets out and it goes nationwide, and you're getting all this publicity, people are going to start asking questions about the Mayaguez incident. And they don't want that. They want this to disappear. So my timing in figuring out everything is, if the DNA testing, I would say they probably had results on the DNA testing around September 2009, just before Charles Ray left.
Mm-hmm.
He left at the end of 2009. So there's some questions here that need to be answered.
Yeah. I know that anytime I've ever bits and pieces, the update thing that the legal families do on a regular basis. They always, at the last thing they always ask is, why does Webb still have a job?
Yes, sir.
The League of Families is not has also been. They realize that they've gotten a lot of runarounds and mistruths and so forth from Mr. Webb. Since I've been involved in the POWMIA issue, there's always been, why does Webb still have a job?
Well, I have to agree with him. Since that day, I met with him in March 2009, and Johnny Webb gave me his word he would look into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I tell you I'll look into it, Bill, you expect a follow-up, don't you?
Yes, sir.
I have not heard a single word from him, and it's been 6 years.
Well, there's been a lot of, thanks to Stars and Stripes, there's been a lot of information brought out about JPAC's problems. And reading the other day from the League of Families, they're concerned that now that Hagel is going to take the two different groups that are involved with JPAC and put it all under one umbrella, they're going to still have the same people. They're just changing the name of the group, but it's still the same
Right.
people, so you're going to get the same result.
And what I say about that, if they keep Johnny Webb and they keep Tom Holland, all they're doing is whitewashing it.
Yeah.
They're what purpose does it suit? If Tom Holland still stays over the Central Identification Lab and Johnny Webb's still in his position, it's still going to be the same thing. If he don't make any changes, he'll never gain the trust of the Hargrove family. And I thought this might be what it's all about, gaining trust.
Mm-hmm.
So if Hagel hears this, you can go a long ways by getting rid of Johnny Webb and Tom Holland.
Well, I don't think Johnny Webb's got any trust with any of the families from what I've been able to study and read about. I don't think anybody trusts anything he says. So.
Well, it don't go too far with the Hargrove family.
Yeah. Continue on with your story. I mean, interrupt you.
Well, some people might say, well, what's he talking about when he speaks of the powers that be? And I guess I would ask those who are listening to ask yourself the question, how much do you really know about the Mayaguez incident? And if you want to put it to the test, tomorrow you go out, and as you're meeting with your people in just a daily occurrence, ask them about the Mayaguez incident. See how many actually knows anything about it. Because the powers that be have done an excellent job at trying to keep this out of the papers, keeping it quiet. And there again, they're saying, well, he's one of those conspiracy fellas. But I can start giving you some examples of how they've been covering this up. I mentioned in the first show about Joseph's brother calling the Pentagon and wanting to know if was there any more information that's came to light, to update them. And the response he got was, well, don't you think your time would be better spent at home comforting your mother? I mean, that's the kind of responses they got. Yeah. When I came back on the first trip, I went to one of our local groups and I was speaking, and I noticed that this retired Marine got up and walked out. And I said, well, that's okay. He's a retired Marine. This probably he didn't want to hear. And then the following year when I came back, I spoke to this same group. And this fella sat in this time because I started talking about my witnesses, about what they heard and in detail about the remains. And maybe a couple weeks later, he came up in my driveway, blew the horn, and I came out. And he said, Cary, I guess you noticed I didn't sit in on your first meeting. I said, well, yeah, I noticed that. And I figured it's because you're a retired Marine and it would get to you. And he said, well, also in that second meeting, he stayed in because he thought, he might be on to something. So he has a contact in Washington, and he figured he would give him a call to see what he could find out. So he calls, and he told what I had told him, and he said, see what you can find out. He said, okay, give me a few days. And a few days, this guy calls back. And to keep this name confidential, let's just say the guy's name's Jimmy.
Okay.
And when he answered the phone, he says, Jimmy, you better back off on this one. So my friend says, back off? What do you mean back off? Click. That was the end of the conversation. his source in Washington wouldn't even discuss it. So you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that this guy saw in Washington? When they look up certain things, has it been red tagged? Or, how did he know that you don't discuss this?
Yeah.
But anyway, with that said, for him not to even be willing to discuss it, it says a lot.
Well, for the people who did not seen the other show, let's kind of bring you up to date a little bit. The Mayaquez was a ship that left Vietnam, going someplace. I'm not quite certain where it was supposed to be going, and it was captured by the Cambodians, Khmer Rouge. The sailors were kept hostage, and let's see, President Ford sent the Marines in to rescue the hostages. They were basically told there was just basically a small unit there of cooks and so forth, and the first 3 helicopters, I believe, were shot down. The 4th helicopter was damaged so much it had to leave.
Ditched.
Then they discovered that the Cambodians had released the hostages, and they tried to stop right in the middle of the attack. They tried to stop the attack, but it was too late because things were already moving. We lost a lot of men in the process, for the hostages were already released. But when they and then when they got back to ship, they did a head count, and there were 3 Marines still on the island. That's for those of you who did not see the first show. That's what we're talking about. The 3 Marines were Joseph Hargrove,
Gary Hall, and Danny Marshall.
Okay, and those 3 Marines were left there. They never went back to get them. Let's see, if I remember correctly, Joseph was killed the day afterwards.
The next morning.
And the other 2 lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah, about a week and a half later, they captured them and took them to the mainland, and they were executed in a Buddhist temple.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, that the man who actually put a gun to Joseph's head and shot him actually took J-Pack or somebody to the gravesite and said, "This is where I buried him." So there was witnesses to he was shot. He was wounded in the leg, and then point blank shot in the head.
Yes.
And I believe you mentioned some of the remains that actually had a head wound and a leg wound.
Yep. Fits the description of what the Khmer Rouge or M. Son had given it.
Okay.
But as far as it, and getting back to what I say is a cover-up, or why they're trying to quieten this thing, I had read a statement made by an individual in the 14-Hour War by Captain James Weiss and Scott Barron. And there was one statement in there that really caught my attention, because this was a guy who monitored communications that day. So I thought I would look him up. And I went on the internet and I found this name, and he happened to be a professional photographer. So I just took a shot in the dark and said, maybe this is him. And when I sent him the email, he responded back, "How can I help you, Mr. Turner? It'll be best if we speak by phone." So I called him the next evening, and right to start with, he says, "Mr. Turner, I hope you're who you say you are, and I have reason to believe you are, because within 24 hours after I received your email, my computer was hacked." He said, "Just anybody can't get in my computer. I have 3 different types of security." And, one of his specialties, communications. So we arranged a time when I could go up to meet with him. And while I was there, I took my laptop, because I wanted to show him some pictures that I had taken while I was on the island. And while I had it out and I was showing him the pictures, he was a little fidgety, moving around. And I said, "Look, if this bothers you, we don't have to watch these." He said, "No, that's not it." He said, "Don't take this the wrong way." He said, "Do you mind if I look at your computer?" And I knew exactly what he meant. I said, "Sure, here." And I said, "If you find anything out of the norm, it's not me, because I'm dumb as dirt when it comes to computers." And so he started going through it. And after a while, he looked and he said, "Yep, there it is." He said someone had gone in and lowered my firewall to the lowest setting. He said, when you buy a computer laptop, they're usually set on medium range. It had been dropped to the lowest range, and a bug had been attached to the solution center. And he said, you know what that means? I said, no. He said, have you ever used a solution center to whenever you had a problem with a computer? I said, well, I know that much. And I said, yes. He said, well, what happens is when you clicked on Solution Center and it activated a bug, and it gives an updated history, my browsing history, to whoever put it there. Mm-hmm. So he said, you're being watched, my friend. And he talked me into spending the night with him that night. And I slept on the couch in the living room. And right by the couch, there's a window with no curtains, which makes me uncomfortable. But he kept the front porch light on. So if anybody was to look in, they have to come up to the front porch, put their hand, to block the light and look in. So it's about 2:30 in the morning, and the way his house sits, there's an alley on the left side, and then you have the main street. And about 2:30, I hear something like a motor. So I raise up and I peep over the couch, and there's, just like you see in the movies, there's a black SUV sitting right at that stop sign. And it sits there, and my truck's sitting with the tail facing that vehicle, so you can see my license tag, which I'm sure they already had it. But it sat there probably 30, 45 seconds. Then it eased on. And I told this guy the next morning, I said, well, you're being watched too. But, it could have been nothing to it. It just could have been coincidental. Two, going back... I had mentioned about Jay Silverstein's internal memo. Mm-hmm. Well, August of 2010, I was at a commissioner's meeting, and when I got home, we broke up early that day. And I had a message on my answering machine from Jay Silverstein. He was trying to get up with me. So I immediately called Hawaii, trying to get up with him. And I couldn't get nothing but his voicemail, so I called him numerous times. Never could get up with him, and I thought, I missed a window of opportunity. He had something he wanted to tell me. He didn't just call me from Hawaii just to be talking. Mm-hmm. And I thought either he changed his mind or someone changed his mind for him. And this was in August, and that following spring is when Jay wrote the internal memo, where he's pretty much plain speaking and saying what JPAC's doing wrong. They're not following procedure. They're doing things that possibly could be messing with evidence and just a number of things. But what I had said, what really caught my eye was what he said about the head investigator in 1999. I want to get that year right. About how there was evidence found at the site that I believe is Joseph Hargrove's site, and that the evidence was mishandled. And he also noted in the memo that this individual, this investigator, after the fact received raises and promotions far above his colleagues. Mm-hmm. So you have to ask yourself, was that a payoff? Or was it really raises and promotions?
Yeah. Well, the government has a tendency to take the people who make the biggest mistakes and blows things worse and gives them raises and so forth anyway. So.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to show the pictures that you sent me, and I'm going to let you tell people what they're looking at and go ahead and get started on the pictures. And well, the first part is of course, introduction of North Carolina Vietnam veterans in a little bit. But I'm going to let you tell what people are looking at and explain it to them a little bit.
Okay. And
when we come back to live again, that the Education Czar, Mr. Bob Matthews, will be sitting here and continue asking and Cary the questions.
Thank you. Do you want me to read that?
No, not that. Just on pictures. Just talk about
yeah,
the pictures.
Just the pictures for the. For me, I'm no speed reader. This is a colored photograph of what I showed earlier that was in the Phnom Penh Post. It's found on the March 7th through 20th issue, 2008, and it's on the third page, top right corner, where it's very specific in saying that It was an American soldier's remains found on Koh Tang. This was provided me by Sergeant Charles Wright, who I will mention shortly. This was Joseph Hargrove's platoon sergeant. This article was written in the paper 5 days after the incident, and I wish that you could actually blow it up and read it more, but one of the things that struck me on this is that how they used the number 3. They said 3 were killed, but there were 15. There was a few times in there the number 3 was mentioned, but nothing about the 3 left behind. So I would only assume that was to quell any rumors that might start out to try to head them off. This is a picture of Joseph in his teen years, one of the rare photographs, and this is around 1974 when he was a Marine. This brings back memories, especially Joseph, I'm sure, went into this store many times, this old Hargrove grocery. As a little boy, we would often go into this store. I can still remember how it smelled, but this is the site of Cary Hall, where he was buried. If you come back about 10 yards towards us, that would be the actual grave site of Cary, but it was bulldozed over twice in a period of 25 years, and they did find shivers of bone at this site, and they've kept them, so maybe, hopefully, in years to come, they will perfect the DNA testing and can prove that they were the remains of Cary. This is the site where, when they executed Danny Marshall, they had thrown him in the ocean, and over a period of 3 days, his body washed back in twice, and in the 120-degree heat, he was bloated, floating, and M. Son said he tied rope to his feet, and he floated him over to these rocks, pulled him right up through this crevice and over the rock. And then the next frame, he pulled him up right in this point and tied him off. And he said he came back about a month later and that there were just bones. This is the flak jacket of Daniel Benedette. JPAC insists that they found no remains in '08, but this was found on the East Beach that contained remains, and it's of my opinion that those were the remains of Daniel Benedette. And Daniel Benedette was sent home in January of 2013, and they buried his remains in Arlington on May 15th last year. This is a blurred picture, and I apologize for it. I had my wife taking pictures, and I guess I left it on manual instead of automatic. This is Kelton Turner's 2 sisters. To the left is Carla, and the one facing me is Sonia. And I'm showing, that's the moment. That's what I call the moment. I'm showing them for the first time Kelton's dog tag. This was in Las Vegas. I really hate that that was blurry. Here, if you notice the gentleman out front, that's Captain Michael Stahl. If you look just to the left of Michael's head, you will see a fellow there with dark hair. That's Sergeant Charles Wright, Joseph's platoon sergeant. And yes, he was there. A statement made in the 14-hour war is that there's one guy said that he got the assignment to secure the 90-millimeter recoilless rifle. It was Sergeant Charles Wright that got the orders and carried out the mission. He secured that with help of the other men. This is a ceremony on the aircraft carrier where they're laying Joseph Hargrove's rifle to rest, courtesy of Sergeant Charles Wright. And this is the book cover.
Yes.
Yep, my book, with the help of a lot of good friends.
Well, Cary, again, everybody, welcome to the second half of the show, Lessons of Vietnam. And as Cary and I are speaking, as Bill Dixon mentioned before, please call in if you have a comment at 919-518-9773, and welcome Mr. Turner back to the show. We have a wealth of information, And Cary, first of all, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
And as Bill mentioned recently, we had a trip to Vietnam. We had a lot of time to talk on the plane. And believe me, I'm going to give your book a plug because I took this book with me. I read it 3 times. This is thought-provoking. I mean, every time I read your book, I have more questions.
Thank you.
And I thought tonight, when I got my my time with you on the show, I would ask you a couple questions because these come up with the other veterans. Because they don't know you, but they know of the work you've done. And you're to be highly commended for this. Because this is a life's work. How long have you been at this now?
I started in February '07.
Yes. Well, my first question is, the captain of the Mayaguez, the guy in charge, Charlie T. Miller. Have you've talked a little bit about him?
Yes, sir.
What can you tell the audience about Mr. Miller?
Well, I was trying to look up some information on him on internet because someone had told me that he committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to prove it one way or another, I couldn't find a single thing on Captain Miller other than he was born in California in 1911 and who he married. And then your normal Mayaguez incident things, you know, that the media had and the court case. And that's it. For those of you who are listening, I would challenge you.
Yes.
Find something on Captain Charles T. Miller. I guess maybe I'm reading things into it again. You know, I do that. Why is it that you can't find an obituary, you can't find anything on him? Even if he was living, it looks like you would find something.
That's right. I think so.
So could this be the powers that be at work? Or
Well, you mentioned on the first half of the show, the power of suggestion in today's world is very important. You've just suggested something. You've thrown out a challenge there. I'd like to do it also. I'd like our listeners who are very interested in this issue and in lessons of Vietnam to do some research on Charles T. Miller out of California, captain of the Mayaguez, and get on this trail with us. If more eyes looking, more information can be found.
If anybody finds anything, I would be very interested in hearing it.
Yes. Now, you also mentioned, Cary, earlier on the show, that the Mayaguez incident, you mentioned, I think, to Bill Dixon, when you go to work at your workplace and you're talking in the morning over coffee or a donut, and you're talking about the news, if you mention something like the Mayaguez, which you and I talked about before, you get a blank stare.
Yes, sir.
You get a blank stare. But that's true in a lot of cases in history. Like people often say, the Korean veterans often say they're the forgotten war. No one knows anything about it. Well, what is your impression here? The Mayaguez was called the last battle of Vietnam. You have all the information. You've done the research for several years. Why do most people know nothing about it?
There I go reading between the lines again. I honestly believe that it's the powers that be. You know, they can control media. They can determine through, like, the Central Identification Lab, you know, if these individuals say this individual don't go home, that's the way it's going to be. Until I have anything else, that's all I can assume is that there are certain individuals who have tried to quieten this down and try to just crush it any way you turn.
Well, Cary, we have had a privilege the last several years in Wake counties here in Raleigh and all over the country to teach Vietnam. And we've also taught teachers how to teach Vietnam and how not to. And we go from start to finish. And we always mention the Mayaguez incident. It's always taught. Now, we don't have a lot of detail on it, but we're getting more and more on it. But it seems like when you look at a textbook, you look in the back, you go to the V section for Vietnam, you look up the Vietnam War, there's more and more information every day. More information. I think the secret might be if they want to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start teaching something, you know a little bit about it, you feel awkward. You said before you run into a lot of people that you think have a lot of questions that you can't answer. I have one for you. You and Bill talked earlier on the show about JPAC, how Secretary Hagel is going to merge them together now, perhaps leave the same people in charge. In your wildest dreams, if you were in charge of the JPAC infrastructure, how would you restructure it?
I would clean house.
Everybody.
Yes, sir. Well, you have certain individuals. It wouldn't be everybody, but there are certain, especially in leadership, that if you really want to make an impression with the people that you're very sincere about cleaning up this mess, you don't keep the same individuals, because it's very clear Johnny Webb's one of the problems. But yet they're going to keep him. I mean, here's a man that promised me, well, gave his word. There's a difference in promise. He gave his word back in '09 that he would look into it. And to this day, up to this moment, I've never heard a single word from him. I even sent him an email informing him that Joseph's mother had died. No response.
Not a word.
None. Just complete silence. I would assume that after that meeting, I might have known more than they thought I did.
Sure.
And that they went under a gag order. I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think here you have to assume some things.
Yes,
because
sir.
you've done this path, and you've run into so many roadblocks. You've gone around a lot of them. How is your book being received so far?
Seems to be very well. Very well. I've had people email me. I've had people to call. I had a lady call me from Alabama.
No kidding.
Said she was very impressed with the book.
How can we get one?
You can order the book through tapepublishing.com. As of April 29th, it should be out at Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com. Eventually, it should be in Sam's Club.
Sure. Well, I've said this before. There's this book. I recommend it to everybody I know that likes to talk about the 60s, about Vietnam, about the Mayaguez. This book will keep you up at night. I mean, you put it down, you go back to the book. You go back to it for questions. I read it again today. It's my third read, and I was looking at the back here and some questions and different things you've uncovered. So this Webb guy, if somebody is writing his name down, you know they are, where can they contact Johnny Webb?
It's been so long since I've tried to contact him. I gave up probably within 6 months after when he gave me his word, and then I emailed him a few times and I got nothing. I just gave up. I tried to email some of the other members of JPAC.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Jay Silverstein is the only one that tried to contact me in 2010, and then that following spring he comes out with the internal memo. Mm-hmm. I honestly believe I missed a window of opportunity. I think his conscience was playing on him.
It sure sounds like it.
And I think he possibly might have been monitored, and somebody changed his mind.
Well, now this is late May of 2014. What are Cary Turner's plans from this moment on?
Well, I guess a lot depends on this book. That if I can get this book out, that hopefully someday it'll find its way into the hands of someone who can do something about it. You know, I just want him home. I don't care about nothing else. I don't care about politics. I don't care the end results. I just want him home. Mm-hmm. Some people say, well, you're taking a mighty big risk here. But the day that I made up my mind I was going to do something for Aunt Charlotte, I realized the risk. And I had decided all those years ago that I was willing to pay the price if that's what it takes. There's a lot worse ways of dying. And for me, I couldn't think of a more noble way than to try to bring home a family member. And I'm going to hold to it.
Well, the Hargrove family has paid quite a price.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you'll reacquaint the audience with the price the Hargrove family has paid.
Well, Lane, who was Joseph's older brother, in fact, Lane was the one that Joseph idolized. He just looked up to Lane so much. And Lane went to Vietnam, I believe it was in January. And on April 19th, they were out on patrol, and they crossed over a landmine, and he was hit. And they flew him out to the hospital ship. And 3 days later, they said he was in good spirits. He was joking, but he died of a blood clot on the 21st. And that really demolished Joseph.
Of course.
And then that was in 68, April of 68. And then Joseph in May 75. So the Hargroves have lost two.
Both on the wall, of course.
Yes, sir. In fact, next weekend they're having a memorial dedication in Camp Lejeune over in Jacksonville. And I went by to see it a few weeks ago, and I loved it because they've got Lane and Joseph side by side.
That's great.
And the two names right there together. Very appropriate.
Very appropriate. Well, when you were getting frustrated, and I can tell by your speech that you're still frustrated, obviously.
Yes, sir.
You want answers and you want them now.
Yes, sir.
How long is your patience, Cary?
Till I die.
No timetable.
I'm going to fight it until my last breath or until he comes home.
Is there an outside chance that Cary Turner may be going back to Cambodia?
I won't rule it out.
You've been there twice, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But it won't be to look for Joseph's remains. I am firmly convinced that they have his remains. I've caught them in too many things that are not true. And in my opinion, of where I come from, if you have something that you're going to lie about, then you have something you're hiding. And also, if you're quiet about it and refuse to give answers, you have something you're hiding. And when I, looking back, and when I told you about the meeting we had with J-Pack, and I look at David Rosenau, and he's looking over at Johnny Webb, just after they asked his widow what would she do with his remains. Now, they know something.
You know, Bill mentioned a couple of times in the first part of the show, some people missed the first half of the show with you a little while ago. Would you go back over that, what you just said to me again? That look that was across the table when they asked her remains?
More in detail?
Please.
When I had the meeting with J-Pack, when I first went in, there was about 6 members of J-Pack. And very friendly, shaking hands, giving me their cards. And but this one individual, he was across the table from where I would be sitting. And he writes on a little piece of paper, and he throws it across the table. And I picked it up, and it's like he resents that I'm even there. And I read it, and it has Rosenau. It just has his last name, not even his first name. But I looked later, and it was David Rosenau.
David.
And he's the one that opened up the meeting. He said, Mr. Turner, we understand that you've been to Koh Tang. I said, yes, sir. He said, we understand that you've been twice. I said, yes, sir. He said, we also understand that you kept records. I said, well, I kept journals. And he said, can we get a copy of those records? I said, no, you can't. Because I said, I don't trust you nor the government. And reason too, you know.
Yes.
And the reason I wouldn't give them that is because I knew they were interested in my names that possibly were in my journals, but they're not. I'm not that stupid. I'm keeping them in a safe place.
Yes,
but anyway, he sort of, when I said I didn't trust them, Joseph's widow spoke up and she said, not me, I trust y'all. But then she said, and I didn't say this the first time, she said, I appreciate everything you've done. And then I thought to myself, well, what have you done? 30 years, over 30 years, and very little to nothing? But yet, the worst thing that she did then was they saw we were divided. We were not unified. That's a weakness. But anyway, then David Rosenau, he looks, he says, well, we need a copy of those records. Firm, like, you know. And I said, well, you're not getting them. You know, I was firm back. Yeah,
yes,
and I could feel the heat coming off the face. But that's when Johnny Webb held his hand out to David. And then David got in a relaxed position, you know, back in his seat. And that's when Johnny Webb looks at me and he says, Mr. Turner, if there's anything you think we need to be made aware of, I give you my word, I'll look into it. So I'm thinking, you know, but anyway, I was sort of hot with David. And I said, Mr. Webb, you're giving your word to a Southerner. Do you know what weight it carries when you give your word to a Southerner? And like I said, I wasn't expecting this, but he put his elbows on the table and leaned towards me. He said, yes, I do. I'm from Texas. And I wasn't expecting that, you know. But,
yeah.
But anyway, that's when we went in and I started telling him about the things my witnesses had said. And and where he said he had no knowledge of any remains being flown out at Phnom Penh, I got proof. Now his job, one of his jobs is to brief families. He takes part in it.
Sure.
So now, you don't think he didn't know this? And then he says he had no knowledge of any full set of remains being recovered. But yet when Ralph goes to Hawaii, they show him 4 full sets. Full sets. But yet he has no knowledge of it. Now, one or two things. Either he's lying or he does very poorly at his job. In either case, I'd give him his walking papers. I mean, that's just plainly speaking.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how the meeting. But the main thing there is just before we broke up in that meeting, this David Rosenau, he looks at Joseph Switter and he says, "I have one last question for Miss Hargrove before we leave." And she said, "Yes." And he looks, he said, "Miss Hargrove, should you receive any remains, what would you do with them?" And without taking a breath, she said, "I want him buried in Arlington." And when she said that, I knew that killed any chance we had. The number one Googled name in the Mayaguez incident, coming home, Arlington, national publicity. And they don't want that. They want this to go away. They want to keep it quiet.
I wonder why.
Me personally, I think it's because of what was on the ship.
I was going to bring that up next.
Well, according to Jordan Poust, he did an article, and you can find this from the Boston Law College Review or Boston Law College, and he did directly say that there was secret cargo on that ship, and it came out in the court case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to ask yourself the question, what's the secret cargo? And you'll say, okay, why do you think they want to keep this quiet after all these years? You've got some of the individuals, and this is my opinion.
Sure.
You got some individuals who were participants in this, and they don't have many years left, and their conscience is getting the best of them.
Could be.
And so if this thing resurfaces and all of a sudden, it might be enough to push them over the edge, and they'll break the code of silence. And then the walls are going to come tumbling down, and they don't want that. They want this to go away.
We've talked about this a lot, and I just can't for the life of me figure why. I know it would be embarrassing now if a POW came home. They've all been written off completely. The remains should come back, as you say, and you're pursuing this to your last breath. What can groups around the country do for you? We've got an audience tonight. If you get a chance, we've got a few minutes left. You want to give us a call, we're at 919-518-9773. Mr. Cary Turner is our guest, author of Bringing Joseph Hargrove Home. What can people listening do to help you?
Just talk about it. Share it. Spread the word, especially any veterans groups. They asked me what group of people would I target with this book.
Sure.
I said all your active military, your veterans, anybody who wears a MIA POW bracelet, anybody who's patriotic. They're going to be interested in this book.
Sure.
And I know this is minor, but I fought for 4 months for that cover. You ought to saw the colors they had. I was insisting on red, white, and blue because that's what catches a patriot's eye.
Sure does.
And I really had to fight hard for it.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Well, you know, Cary, you have an audience tonight. We've got a lot of questions tonight, but there's a couple we haven't asked. Okay.
It's Monica.
We have a call. Go ahead.
Can't hear it.
Speak up, Monica.
Speak up, please.
Hi.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. This is Monica Katz. Cary, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
On March 15th, I went to a JPAC family advisory meeting, and I spoke to Mr. Holland. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I spoke to Mr. Holland, and I asked him specifically, do you know anything about Joseph Hargrove? And he said, well, yes, I do. And I said, sir, where is Joseph Hargrove? and I pressed him, and he said, I can specifically tell you Joseph Hargrove is not at JPAC in Hawaii. So where else could his remains possibly be?
Well, had I been there, I would have looked at Tom and said, well, Tom, I don't doubt it because you've had 6 years to place him somewhere else. My guess would be, where are the labs? Is there one in the central part of the United States?
I believe so, and I believe there's also one on the East Coast.
Yeah,
but he was
up
very
north.
specific in saying, he did not say JPAC does not have Joseph's remains. He said Joseph Hargrove is not at Hawaii.
Well, had he said that they didn't have Joseph Hargrove's remains, then that would probably sound pretty reasonable. But to say he don't have them in Hawaii, yeah, I would have to question that. Okay, where do they have him?
I wish I had pressed the question further.
I wish you did too. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you,
Thank
Monica.
you, Cary. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Good day.
She's a good lady.
She works very hard.
Yes, she does.
Very hard. She's a very good advocate. Well, I want to recommend, we have a couple minutes left. We have time for a couple more questions before Cary signs off. I'd like to, again, recommend this book. Pick it up and read this. If you're interested in this cause of bringing home Joseph Hargrove, this is a must-read. And Cary, you've done a great job with your research and with your tireless efforts to bring your cousin home. I commend you for that.
Thank you. When you said tireless, that made me think of Michael Barnes in the United Kingdom. When he called me, he spoke with me about an hour on the phone from the UK, and he said, don't you ever get tired? It's just something that you have to do, and my brother's always said that I was sort of like a pit bull. When I latch my teeth into something, I won't quit until I get some results. And maybe he's right. I don't know. Just stubborn. I just want him home.
Yes, you do. I know we all do.
Okay, what is it you have left that you want to tell the people out there?
I think we covered most of it. I'm sure JPAC will be listening to this,
We hope so.
and I just want them to do the right thing. You know, if they want this to be very quiet and do it in a quiet manner and let him come home, I'll keep my mouth shut because I don't care how they do it. I just want him home. That's it.
Well, Bill and I had the opportunity to go to one of the homecomings for, was it Donald Shue in Concord? I'm looking forward to this, him coming home, being invited to this. When he's finally put to rest where he should be. Mm-hmm. And I guess as much as I recommend the book, you got to get people. I got a chance in Washington D.C. once. I was invited to speak to the League of Families. They will never let this rest, this issue, because you can't say it's over. It's never over. You get final answers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't had not one single answer from them. Totally ignored. All these years, nothing but silence.
It's amazing.
Well,
Thank you, Cary.
thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, the word's out there now, buddy.
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome.
Like I said, take it using it.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. That vidblasterguy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.